declare, but the declarations have to be made at the local level. Yeah. Yes. Anything else? Okay. All right. Yes. Well, go on.
There's been a lot of talk about the radio license issue.
Yeah,
and
sure.
the licenses that you would have granted and the president. Now, government has taken a line that most licenses should be reported. In light of your strong advocacy a moment ago for transparency, how would you respond to the government?
Well, they two are not connected. Absolutely not. So the government can do what it wants. If it wishes to revoke the license, that's the government's decision. But then that would be a legal matter. I'm sure people will go to the courts. And so that's the government's position. I didn't know that this government needed any approbation or approval from the PPP to do anything, excepting when they want to commit corrupt acts. Like first, like the hospital, it was, we're not going to go with it, it's corrupt. And then when we found out that they're giving it to a person who was very close, or a group that's very close to Ramjatan, a note public tender, they suddenly fell in love with the PPP evaluation report. That the PPP had evaluated this bidder and ranked him second rank. And so since the first rank bidder, we have him in court now, we have to go with the second rank bidder. And then they lied about it too. There is no evaluation report. In fact, the evaluation report disqualified this company. So they loved the PPP evaluation, misrepresented it when they wanted to commit something in a corrupt fashion. When they want to do other things, they don't focus on that. Take, for example, the procurement of drugs and fertilizer and stuff recently. So we had pre-qualified several people. You put out a notice every 2 years or 3 years to pre-qualify. It's a competitive process. So Lloyd Singh, Ramroop, all of the others apply. You have some criteria, WHO rules, and you assess each company based on the criteria capacity. Are the drugs registered? Do they have bond, etc.? And then on the basis of that, only those people can then submit tenders subsequently because they've been pre-qualified. They keep saying we have single source from Ramroop, not because he was pre-qualified, single source. But what's happening now? Check where the single sourcing is taking place from people who have not even registered their drugs. Not registered their drugs. And secondly, from a man who brought in soap into this country and changed the label on the soap, went to the court, the judge ordered him to remove all the labels. He went to the wharf and sat down and removed all the labels, put locks on it. The same person who supplied milk to the government and put a French company that has supplied it, and there's no such French company in existence. The same company that we heard it's a political investment that he made into the AFC. They're negotiating a power purchase. Killed a miler, and a miler was 10 cents per kilowatt hour we are buying power, and talk about buying power now at 14 cents per kilowatt hour. And even before the IDB has completed the energy mix study. A lot of these things, when we talk about transparency, at least I made it clear. You had a committee that was set up that recommended it to me as Minister of Information. The committee recommended. You had balance, I believe, regional balance, ethnic balance in this, because About of the 10 licenses, I think 6 went to non-Indo-Guyanese. I ensure ethnic balance across the country, geographic balance. I had some criteria. What is the criteria they're using now to buy fertilizer? Where you have a company in New York, a man who has a Chinese restaurant, and Kaichor used to talk about Fit Motilal. Remember, Fit Motilal was selling some, I don't know what, religious supplies in New York. Well, here now, you have a guy who has a Chinese restaurant, supplies Chinese food, etc. Some of the top officials of the government frequent that restaurant. I gather they were by his home in the pre-election period. He has won a contract now for $420 million to supply fertilizer. This is not drug specialized. This is fertilizer. Anybody could supply the fertilizer. It's not like people can die from it. It's a fertilizer. And single source. Single source. So at least I had some criteria. I used ethnic balance, geographic balance. Those were my criteria, and I kept those the criteria. In terms of the one with Ramroop, you would recall that when he bought the station from Vera, because he did not get a license for any of the media houses from the government, because he set up his newspaper independently. Secondly, he bought the television license from Vera. He bought the TV station from Vera, who is a member of APNU. And Vera had filed a court case for a radio license. And the court ruled, the court ruled that we had to consider that license. That was a court case. That was the only license that the court ruled that we had to consider. So, when they talk about friends, but the balance, nobody talks about the 5 other persons who are non-Indians. I see them mentioning all the time, only Anand Prasad and Bobby Ramroop. What about the 5 other persons who are non-Indians who got licenses for radio across Guyana too? So I can justify lots of the things. I see now they've started about land issues, Kaichor. The land issue you want to come to, and I'm sure you will ask, because I'm sure they gave you a little note. They didn't give you the note. Okay, because Kaichor News does that. Every one of those, the land issues, we went to a public tender for the expression of interest. There were two companies that did not get the land on the East Bank, because what the government did, it went out to a public tender for expressions of interest for developers. It came to the cabinet. There was a decision to say to give everybody an allocation, all of those who tendered. The only 2 groups that did not get land were Eddie Boyer, because he had won a bid, a public tender for the land at Lelendal, and secondly Tulsi Prasad, because Tulsi Prasad said he wanted the land for free, didn't want to pay. That was the report that came to the cabinet. Everyone else paid the same rate, and every person who expressed an interest got an allocation. I notice they're only mentioning 1 person. But why don't they mention some of them who are close to the government now? You have about 10 persons who got allocations of land on the East Bank as developers. Now, what the government needs to do is to see if they have met the conditions now, because there are conditions attached to those contracts. They have to put in a given number of infrastructure. They have to do it within a certain time frame. The sale of they have to build houses, etc. So the government can explore whether they have complied. Yes. So they have to explore that, whether they have complied. But why single out a single one like a Kaichor is doing? Why single out a single one? And when it came, you're talking about transparency. It was out of a public tender for expressions of interest. Didn't happen like the hospital or this, the calling in, the negotiation of the power purchase deal, etc. So that's, I knew you would come to that one, so I just answered it before you did.
Sir, some NGOs, one NGO, sorry, is calling for dismissal of Minister Border Lawrence. There was a comment she made about allegation of rape, or child molestation against an 18 years counselor. Do you think the minister should discipline for the comments?
Clearly, the person who molested the child is reprehensible, and he should face the full force of the law. And all the parties in this country, every single party, should distance themselves from him to send a signal that we will not be soft on child molesters or any person of that or who commit offenses against children. I was president when we decided to strengthen the laws governing, children and their welfare and women. We passed an act against violence against women and children. We strengthened the laws governing welfare of children. We established the Child Care Protection Agency. I think the minister, I'm not sure if she was fully aware of all the facts.
Yes,
She was?
he was aware of that allegation against him before.
Because I don't want to be unfair to Valda Lawrence too, because sometimes in their portfolio, people they don't have all the facts at their disposal. But if she knew of the facts, and she made that comment, I think then she clearly has abdicated her responsibility to the child. She chose a political person in front of a child, and she has not just ordinary responsibility, but a statutory responsibility, political responsibility, administrative responsibility for that ministry to protect to protect the interests of the child. Whether she should resign or not, I think this is a matter for the president. I'm not one who willy-nilly call for the resignation of ministers. If she has expressed contrition, said I was wrong, I'm sorry about it, those comments were unfortunate, and I commit to have a full investigation of this matter, and we are going to bring the full force of the law down on this person's head, then I think she should be allowed to do so. Yeah.
A forensic audit report, a forensic audit into Chino highlighted income that cannot be accounted for from its operations in New York. The newspaper's name is again also TV programs and radio. What would you say to that?
I've never seen that newspaper, so I can't comment on anything. But I'm worried about, and I'm sure, well, not Kaichor News. It's not personal, but Kaichor News will not be worried about this. But most people in Guyana will be worried about the abuse of these so-called audits. That they were done in a political fashion, and they're being used not to pursue legal cases, because that's what should happen. The audits, if they find irregularities, if they find corruption, then those audits should be used to support cases against individuals who they find corrupt. when I listened to Minister Jordan in Parliament speak about the audits that have been completed, his tone was, we have found a lot of procedural errors, etc. Now, in the meantime, these audits are not being used for that purpose, or they're taking a very long time using it for that purpose, but they are being made public selectively without the right of response from other people, the individuals who are affected. I know some of the audits are so unprofessional that they will not withstand not just a court of law, but an ordinary person just assessing it and saying that it's more a political document. So what they're doing now, I believe they're in the process of damaging reputations. So they're giving their supporters, because all of these big claims of corruption, want to give their supporters some red meat. And the conduit is the Kaichor News. The conduit is the Kaichor News for red meat for their supporters. So it's destroying reputations of many, many people. I know Mahendra Sharma, a young, bright professional. Young, bright professional. Look at the assault on this young person. A professional. Second, Winston Brassington. Professional assault again, damaging their reputations, because I suspect Winston Brassington went after Guyana stores that the owner of Kaichor News didn't pay for. They talk about all these privatizations that were not paid for, and they forget to mention Guyana stores, that the owner of Kaichor News is sitting on the board. They didn't have an AGM for 10 years, over 10 years, and they have not paid the government. We had to sue them, go to court, and the matter is in court now. You never hear about that. And recently, by the way, we paid the taxes for Guyana stores, the taxpayers of this country. Was it a payoff? It must have been a payoff by the government for what Kaichor News, the help that Kaichor News is giving them. So this is what is happening. Every single day, it destroying people's reputation based on some audits that are, even when the audits are professional, they handpick certain sections and take them out of context. So that is my view about audits. So if you have these audits and they point to corruption, you know what happens. The next step is hand the audits over to the police, have the police investigate the matter, not have SOKU, which now falls on the office of the president. We were surprised to hear that, because it used to be under the police, go after people, but have a professional investigation. If people stole any money, charge them, put them before the court. That's how you operate. I heard these were forensic audits. Forensic audits are done with the purpose of prosecution, not for Kaichor News. You know, as fodder for Kaichor News and political fodder. It's all fake. This is the last remaining straw